Hey everyone, David here, High Shelf Gaming. Today we're going to do Cyberpunk Red lore update. This video is going to be in two parts. First half of the video is going to talk about canonical lore, history updates, things that are in the Jumpstart kit. And then the second part is going to really focus on our West Marches game that we're going to do. Basically, taking what happened at the end of Chapter 1 and updating what happened to those three folk, with Trace and Snitch Rich and Dr. Weiss, what happened to them, how they responded to this world-impacting event, bringing us all the way to current day. So Cyberpunk 2020, kind of the foundational book for Cyberpunk Red, ends around 2022, 2023, the kickoff of the Fourth Corporate War. In Red, they describe how all that goes down. And if you haven't checked out a bunch of the literature so far, in the world of Cyberpunk, mega corporations run the show. And they just have carte blanche. I mean, they're practically nations of themselves. They have their own security, they have their own, espionage and all kinds of stuff. They're effectively nations. They just don't have to deal with politics from a voting perspective. They just appoint a person, and that person now has more power and authority than most leaders of most countries, including in some cases the US, depending on how you look at it. And they're allowed to do that for a lot of reasons that are covered in Cyberpunk 2020. So, Fourth Corporate War is basically Arasaka and Militech. Militech's American, Arasaka is Japanese. They equally attempt to take control of another megacorp. Doesn't go the way either of them expected, so it escalates. It becomes a global war. Every place that has, heavy finance, heavy tech, heavy industry that these folks care about, between Arasaka and Militech, all of it's fair game, mass chaos, at the people level. I mean, these corporations, they're just making decisions they're playing for keeps. They're trying to take control of everything. And if they can knock one of the big boys out, then they're now the global superpower. With the culmination of the Fourth Corporate War, we see some of the same characters that have been mentioned in past books, in Cyberpunk, like Johnny Silverhand, Alt, Blackhand, all these folks that are big name characters in the past. They kind of have one final run, and that's in Arasaka Tower in Night City, downtown Night City, where Arasaka is trying to build a super secure data center. And this has importance in our own game, Chapter 1. If you watch Chapter 1 or listen to Chapter 1, you'll kind of know where I'm going with this. But basically, the top of the Arasaka Tower, they were building this massive data center that was going to be super secure and give them a lot of sway over the net. Can't let that happen. So what do? You let off a nuke. And so downtown Night City is eradicated. It's gone. There was a pocket nuke that was used. That whole tower and a bunch of the surrounding towers are gone. There's a huge exclusion zone, radiation, all that kind of stuff. And presumably everybody on the squad died, except there's hints in there that maybe not all of them died. So I'll leave you guys to find that stuff out. That's pretty cool. But basically, from a lore perspective, after the end of the Fourth Corporate War, August 20th, 2023, Night City Holocaust, the nuke goes off. Militech, finally, after all of this chaos and destruction and mayhem, finally there's enough political will to just tell Militech to, hey, cool it. And the US government nationalizes Militech. Basically, President Elizabeth Kress, which somebody will tell me is the wrong pronunciation, but it's Elizabeth Kress by my reading. She nationalizes them and basically begins the process of making the US a dictatorship. There's local elections, sure, but no national elections. She's got a firm grip on the future and direction of the nation. Already, there were splinter states. California had long since split from the United States. It's two separate states, for goodness sake. Texas is separate. There's all these states that have separated from the United States. So the United States as a contiguous body is already smaller. And after the end of the Fourth Corporate War, with all the destruction that Militech and Arasaka did, it's even worse. So Militech kind of doesn't exist anymore. There's a bunch of regional powers, regional corporations, but that's it. Get into Arasaka. Arasaka gets split into 3 separate warring factions. I'll let you kind of dig into how all that works out, but it's really interesting, really, really cool stuff. And this has huge impact on our game because if you remember, one of our characters worked for Arasaka before he lost his job and we ran the game. So really interesting stuff in there. The net officially dead, as for all intents and purposes. Giant diaspora. People are fleeing these war-torn areas. As infrastructure is broken down, you have to just start finding food. You have to start finding resources, start finding a way of life, because the Fourth Corporate War has jacked all of that up. It's not pretty. Other settings would call this the churn. This is when there's so much upheaval, so much chaos that just normal folk have really hard time living. And only folks that have real, tough exteriors and real determination are going to make it. And so that's what happens. People with the chutzpah to get up and move and do what they got to do, they do that. Slowly Night City becomes inhabited again after that first shock of the nuke going off downtown. The nomads come way up in prominence. Remember, infrastructure's broken down. Global trade has ground to a stuttering halt. Food's not coming from America going everywhere else now. Medicine's not coming over from India anymore. We got to just figure it out. It's bedlam. So nomads become kind of critical to the survival of cities at this point because they manage the logistics of moving bulk goods across the country. They're the only ones that are equipped and in the right place to do this job, and they're civilized enough to make that happen. Granted, there's a lot of dangers when they do that, but hey, it's Night City, it's Cyberpunk, right? It's dangerous. You got to get it done. Cyberpunk Red picks up 2445-ish. There's no a specific dates in here, so if you want your game to start in 2040 or 2050, you're fine. Just make your game start in those areas, and you're totally cool. But the things that matter, I think, the most, first wave cities is a really cool thing that they're introducing, and the idea is there's a bunch of towns that really languished during 2020 and are seeing a huge resurgence in the time of the Red, after the red sky and all of that stuff from the nuke and all of the other calamities that happened, like rocks falling from space. And I mean, it was terrible. When you read this section, there's a lot going on during the Fourth Corporate War and around that time. But during this time, 2035 to 2045, this is really a time of rebuilding. This is a time of reclaiming lost cities, bringing them back online. Ways of life are still happening. I mean, U.S. is still kind of jacked. It's still pretty much a dictatorship. There's some special notes in there for that. But kind of what is, I think, really critical is we're finally seeing lost tech coming back, being replaced by new tech for the first time. It's no longer just scavenged tech, found tech. It's now, we're finally starting to see new stuff. We're finally starting to see factories back online. You kind of think about that. For 10, 20 years, there wasn't a major manufacturing base in a lot of these countries. It was pretty jacked up, Mega buildings rising to handle these huge populations and feed people and that kind of thing. This is really beginning to shape the world that is eventually going to make what 2077 becomes. So obviously Red is kind of at the end of the churn, right? So we're no longer experiencing huge die-offs of the population, none of which the players really cared about because they were worried too much about their own survival, let alone billions of other people they're never going to meet. They're worried about their own skin. So in the time of the Red, there was a lot of churn, and we're just now getting out of that. We're just now seeing new tech, new factories, new growth, right? Those sorts of things. It took a long time to get here. And the world is pretty jacked, but this is exciting. One other thing I hadn't mentioned that is really cool in here is the ghost town or the ghost city. Hong Kong was eradicated. The population of Hong Kong was eradicated back in 2020 by some bioterror weapon. Effectively, it was a ghost town. So it got walled off by the Chinese government. Said, all right, nobody can go here because there's this crazy disease, and we're just gonna quarantine that. Lights are still on, power still works, data centers still work. So Ghost Town, or Hong Kong, has become a mecca, a survival point, a bastion for AIs and the netrunners who have uploaded their consciousnesses to the net. They were all being hunted by rabbits. The net was a hostile place. They all went to Hong Kong. They all went to this ghost town, at least by the lore so far in Cyberpunk Red. I mean, there's not a lot of pages dedicated to this, but there's a lot of information in here. Effectively, that's the update, right? That's the core world book. How that impacts our game. Remember, Chapter 1, Snitch Rich was working for Arasaka by the end of it. He had agreed to allow the cybernetic implant in his brain that helps him work with AI. He agreed to let them start using that again. And August 20th, 2023, his girlfriend winks out of existence. He has no idea what happened. Maybe she was caught in the explosion. Maybe she made it. She probably didn't, right? During this time of churn and diaspora, our three friends, Dr. Weiss, Trace, and Snitch Rich, band together and unhook from Night City and go with the nomad tribe that adopted Snitch Rich in the beginning. There's some cultural differences, there's some personality conflicts, and eventually this group breaks off and they make their own nomad tribe, their own corp. Okay. And so they break off and do their own thing. Also during this time, because of Snitch Rich's contacts and because of Dr. Weiss's a relationship with the X-Fit guys and all those folks, they actually have kind of a good little crew. They've got a bunch of beefed up dudes from the X-Fit community. They've got a bunch of kids from Arasaka, because Snitch Rich was able to track down and locate a lot of these orphans from Arasaka. Arasaka was putting, cybernetic lattices in people's brains to make them more easily communicating with AI at the speeds of an AI. And so, after the fall of Arasaka, they were effectively orphaned. There was nobody to take care of them. They were giant pains in the neck for anybody who was taking care of them. Snitch Rich and the crew, Trace and everybody, ran around collecting them. And so this tribe has about 20 or so orphans of Arasaka that have this special cybernetic implant. The X-Fit crew, a handful of nomads from the community, and whoever else they brought together. So from a lore perspective, that's what gets us into Chapter 2 at High Shelf Gaming is, this nomad tribe is formed from a cobbling of a bunch of different groups that were looking for a place to live, and they've kind of made their own culture, they've kind of made their own scene, and we're together. X-Fit guys are playable as far as I'm concerned. Orphans of Arasaka are playable. They're now of age. They're now productive members of the tribe, so they're playable as far as I'm concerned, and there's going to be some special rules around that cybernetic implant. Snitch Rich and Dr. Weiss and Trace, they're going to go the way of the NPC. They're still involved with the tribe, but they are not going to be involved in the day-to-day down in the trenches work that the players are going to have. So that's really how we're going to get started in this game, is we're a tribe, a nomad tribe, hanging out outside of Night City. They're a member of a tribal nation that they're kind of grandfathered in because of their relationship with Snitch Rich's old family. And, away we go. We will be doing some session zeros later on this week and all kinds of good stuff. I hope that this lore update has been helpful. this is how we're going to use this lore. If you're running your own game and you want to take some of the things I said and apply it to your own game, or you pick up the Jumpstart kit and you go through those details and you want to run it a different way, please do. It's so rich. There's so much stuff in here. But I wanted to do a high level lore update so everybody knew kind of the main world events, and then also how they impact Chapter 2 here at High Shelf Gaming. So thanks a ton. As always, have fun and play well.